Hi everyone, welcome to another Aperture experience. My name is Scott Davenport. So today I'm doing something a little different. I gravitate toward landscapes and architecture photography, but today I'm looking at a portrait. My son is completely into the Hunger Games and anything survival, and as fate would have it, he got a slingshot from one of his friends over the holidays. So while we were out, over the weekend and the nearby parks and the woods, and letting him practice, I decided to take a few pictures of him. And the one that you see here on the screen, came out really good. I just liked his expression, his intensity, and thought I'd try my hand at a portrait, and doing something that you might see on a movie poster for some type of survival type show. So I wanted the portrait to be very gritty, and not polished like a studio portrait. So did some poking around the web like you might expect, and several years ago there were some techniques that were popularized for Lightroom to do a gritty portrait with just a few settings, and some folks graciously had translated that to Aperture. It boils down to playing with exposure, cranking up recovery, cranking up definition and vibrancy in the enhance brick, and then playing with saturation. And that was the basics of it. Since the blogs that I found were written, Aperture's changed a bit. Some of the controls maybe are more or less sensitive than they were. So I did a little bit of modification on them. And I thought I'd just walk through them here because I thought this was it was certainly new for me. I thought it might be interesting for you, and I'm going to make the starting preset available so that folks have a starting point, because presets are good and presets are cool. So let's first off just take a look at doing some basic modifications here. Let me get into a better view here. So this, other than a crop, and I think maybe a slight retouch because he had a scratch on his face, this is out of the camera. And so again, I love his expression. This is really cool, but it's kind of flat, kind of bland, as you would expect from a raw file, right? So let's start off with doing what I said before. We're going to do the exposure here, and that's really starting to look kind of horrible. Something else we can play with is the black point. I don't know, something like that maybe. Again, this is just step one. We're not expecting magic to happen here. Next, we crank up the definition. So it's already starting to get very gritty. Crank up the vibrancy. Now here's where it's getting interesting. You take down the saturation. You want that urban, washed out kind of feel, somewhere, maybe there. And I'll also add a vignette, so I'll do a Control V for the flat vignette. And that's the basics. There's still more that I want to do to this photo, but for a preset, these are the basics. So I've actually created a preset for this, and we'll see how close my playing here was. So I've got effects, I have gritty portrait, and let me hold down Option to replace. And okay, I guess I'd gone a little bit darker on maybe on the blacks. Oh, yeah, maybe slightly different. Oh, my exposure was up a little bit as I played there. So that's the quick and dirty of it. Pretty simple and pretty straightforward to do. It lends itself very well to a preset. There's no advanced masking or brushing. For me, there's still more I want to do to this photo. So well, why don't we go ahead and do that? Okay. Oh, you know what? I just realized what the difference was with me playing with these sliders and the vignette and my preset. I wanted it grittier, and so I added an extra definition. So if I turn that off, you can see that's kind of just playing with the sliders a bit, adding a vignette. And then this is, again, just a default apply all for definition. I liked that a little better. I really wanted it, a more crunchy. But again, I want to do a little more here. The background is a little distracting. This is bright over here. And of course I want to do some sharpening to really bring out his eyes and his teeth. I mean, the expression is just great. So let me start with a curve to try to deal with the background. So let me just put the curve on, and I just want to bring the brightness down. So now what I'm looking at is I'm paying attention to really more things that are out here. I'm not watching his face or the foreground. I'll brush that away in a minute, but I'm mainly looking at the edging. I'm getting a little bit too of a dark vignette there. I'll have to brush away there as well. Something like that. And let's say brush curves away. Let's bring that all the way up. Nice big feather. Actually, maybe a little bit too big. That was all right. So we'll brush this away. First, I want to brush the curve away from his face and this foreground area. Yeah, something like that. Bring the brush size down a little bit. Kind of getting through there. It's okay to have his hand there. And I'll take it maybe down to half strength and just kind of brush away a little bit on this back area where it got a little bit too dark. Yeah, something like that. Here's where I would love to be able to lift the mask and apply it to another adjustment. That would be incredibly handy because I'm thinking about using some burn here to really lower those highlights. Let's try this instead of just we'll just use the highlights to see if we can pop that down a little bit. It's helping some. A little bit, it might be good enough. And again, just to make sure I'm not removing highlights from my subject, I'll brush those away from here. And I'm really only looking at the highlights area. I probably could even try changing the brush scope to just be the highlights. So something like that. And this is actually starting to look pretty good. I think the last thing I'll do is a sharpen. So I have a shortcut for that, S. I usually will do some basic sharpening at a slightly lower strength. For my subject, I'm not going to sharpen any of the background, but then I'll pop it up to full strength and focus in on like the eyes for a portrait particularly, and the teeth. That's it. Actually, let's do one more experiment here. We'll dodge, and I usually am very soft on the dodging, but the idea here is to see if making his eyes a little bit whiter and maybe his teeth a little bit whiter adds something to the photo. Not sure. Let's just go ahead and paint it in really quickly, and we can play with that, see if that makes a difference. Yeah, maybe a little bit too over the top with the eyes. It kind of starts to look like a demon child. He's really not that bad. He's a nice kid. So I think that's good. I think we'll leave it there. So hopefully you found this useful. I mean, again, I'll put a link to the preset. I'm also going to put a link to the blogs where I found the information about these techniques. Credit where credit is due. I'm not inventing these things. I'm just employing them and showing them to you. And that's it. You know what? I lied. I'm not done yet. There's a couple of things here that I'm not happy with. His skin got a little bit too gritty, so I'm going to just soften that up with a light skin smooth, just on his face, because that got a little bit too rough. That's pretty good. Maybe even lower the intensity just a little bit, so you still have some of that grit. And the other thing I'm going to do is add one more definition adjustment, and just specifically on the hair, just to get that contrast really out. He's got some orange highlights in his hair. I wonder if we use a color adjustment, and let's see, pick one of those oranges and just see if we boost that up a little bit. Does that add anything? And you can hear my MacBook Pro starting to scream for mercy as I use the graphics processor too much. Let's see, before, after. It's really, really subtle. It looks like it's adding more to the overall picture than it is just to his hair. I think I'll leave it off. So, again, using some skin smoothing to back off some of the grittiness, too gritty on the face. And in this particular case, some more definition on the hair, so it's standing out. All right, I think that's really it this time. Thanks a lot, folks. See you again.